Councilor Gardner, will you please lead us in the singing of our national anthem?
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras c'est porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee peoples, the Mohawks of Akwesasne, the original keepers of this land. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Justin Towndale.
Present.
Councillors Claude McIntosh. Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
Maurice Dupel.
Present.
Sarah Good.
Present.
Caroline Hébert.
Présent.
Councillors Elaine McDonald.
Present.
Sig Gardner.
Here.
Denis Sabourin.
Present.
Todd Bennett.
Present.
And Fran Goujo.
Présent.
All present, Mr. Mayor.
Any additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda? Councilor Good?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull number 3 and number 5 from consent.
Any further amendments, Councilor Ngunjo?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move items 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Any further amendments?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk?
We're going to be moving communication item number 1 to be dealt with immediately following the presentation, as our consultant and lawyer will join us on a Zoom call. And secondly, the removal of recommendation B from consent report number 7, request for complimentary parking.
I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please. Councilor Gardner, Councilor Ngunjo, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Any disclosures of interest? Councilor Dupel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll declare a conflict of interest for the United Way's presentation as I chair the Agape Center, and we've been the administration for that project.
Thank you. Any further declarations of conflict? Okay. Can I have a motion to move into committee of the whole, please? Councilor McIntosh, Councilor Hollingsworth, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Motion to adopt the minutes from the meeting of Monday, October 23rd. Councilor Good, Councilor Dupel, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So I just want to start off before we move into presentations, just to recognize the U14 River Rats. So we have a photo of them on the screen. They were invited to come by City Hall outside of a council meeting to sign the Book of Acknowledgements. The River Rats are the 2023 Junior Provincial Champions, and then they were able to represent Ontario at the National Championship. They took 4th place overall. Not only that, they were also awarded the Joe Shea Sportsmanship Award. So these ambassadors from our community performed extremely well and are worthy of recognition. So perhaps we give them a round of applause despite them not being here tonight. Just like to take a moment to congratulate them again on everything they've accomplished. Madam Clerk?
Our first presentation on the agenda is Last Resort Fund Update by Juliette Labossière from United Way.
Welcome back to council.
Thank you. Good evening. Bonsoir. Sego. Thank you for the invitation to return to council to be able to provide you nearly a year later with an update on how we have utilized the funds received by the City of Cornwall. Next slide, please. So I wanted to be able to provide with you a full portrait of the funds that were received in this presentation that will, for the Last Resort Fund. The City of Cornwall was a major donor to this project, but we did receive funds, and I want to acknowledge that and very appreciative, from the Kinsman Club of Cornwall, from 5B Family Foundation, from the Tom and Gail Knebb Family Foundation, and from DevCorps. Next slide, please. So just a short description. The fund fills gaps for financial assistance for people in precarious situations or experiencing unforeseen crisis. It provides individuals with a one-time helping hand to ensure that they can access, remain in stable and safe housing. What was initially projected to be a one-year fund for our most vulnerable neighbors to access during the challenging days of the pandemic has now transitioned into a long-term program with additional funding partners to keep it running. It is successful. It is impactful. It is the most bang for your buck that you will get in the housing sector. Next slide, please. The investment by the City of Cornwall, $300,000, was received in late 2022. And so we, along with our partners, decided to invest it in 5 quarterly installments as projected above. Next slide. During our 2022-2023 fiscal year, which include the first installment from the City of Cornwall, $171,000 was invested into our region for the Last Resort Fund. $57,000 of that specifically for residents of the City of Cornwall. Overall, SD&G, Cornwall, and Akwesasne saw 121 individuals or families serviced by this program. And this program, administered by Agape for all those living in Cornwall and Akwesasne, and House of Lazarus for all those living in SD&G. Next slide, please. For our fiscal year, specifically for the City of Cornwall, next slide, please, we invested $74,685 that impacted 62 individuals to be able to stay in their homes or find a new place to live. $34,000 of that was funds from the City of Cornwall. Next slide. As you can see, first and last month's rent is the highest need in Cornwall. And I'm proud to say that 17 individuals who were experiencing homelessness or who were precariously housed found sustainable lodging through this program. The average amount that was necessary for an individual was $1,204. The largest sum that we paid out was $2,550 for rent arrears. And the smallest amount, because sometimes the smallest amount does make the biggest impact, was $36.24 to pay for a police check that was necessary for a rental application. And just in comparison, I want to let you know that in SD&G and our rural component of this program, the highest need at 31% was heat arrears, specifically around propane, gas heating, and wood, because many of our citizens in the counties still heat with wood. First and last month's rent was the least requested in the counties at 13%, but we still managed to house 8 individuals who were experiencing homelessness or who were precariously housed in our rural counties to find sustainable housing. Next slide. To be able to bring you up to date with what's happened since the end of our fiscal year, I have data from April 1st to the end of September. An additional $68,400 of the City of Cornwall funds were invested into our city. And this assisted 174 additional individuals. 2 individuals accessed the last resort loans, with your credit union. And I'm proud to say that as of today, we actually have 5 individuals in our loan program. It is really important to highlight that Agape retains a 0% admin fee on this program. They have not taken a single cent to staff and roll out this program, ensuring that all money that we are dedicating to this program goes directly to the individuals who need it. Next slide. From April till September, first and last month's rent remained the highest need in Cornwall. And additional individuals who are experiencing homelessness or who were precariously housed found sustainable lodging through this program, including 5 that were offered additional or prolonged emergency shelter. The average amount paid out was $1,052, so we remain around the same numbers, and the largest sum paid out was $3,050 that needed to assist someone with first and last month's rent. I don't think it's news to anybody in this room that the cost of rent has skyrocketed in our town. The smallest amount paid out in this time period was $187.10 to pay hydro arrears and avoid cutoff. 24 different agencies and companies referred clients into the last resort program. Just in case you can't see it, dark blue is 26%. Next slide, please. I want to share with you real stories. 3 individuals from whom I changed the name to preserve their dignity and their privacy. Dawn is a senior whose wife was no longer able to work after being diagnosed with MS. With additional medical expenses, including transportation out of town and a loss of income, they fell behind on their bills and were living in a cold home this winter, unable to pay for electricity to heat their home. Gina is an Ontario Works recipient and works part-time at a local grocery store in Cornwall. She lives on so little that she couldn't afford to pay her hydro bill. And when she called us, she was using an extension cord to hook up to her neighbor's electricity, giving her sole use of 3 lights in a house that she owns. Paul was struggling to heat his home. He had an old propane space heater that was over 20 years old and no longer safe to use. The cost to replace this heating system was an expense he couldn't afford, and these costs didn't fit into any government subsidy program. Unfortunately, these are not isolated experiences. More than 40% of people receiving pensions, subsidies, and/or working in SD&G and Cornwall earn less than $33,337 annually. In Cornwall, it's over 50%. Why 33,337? Because in 2022, that was the average cost of living in our region. We just announced the new living wage rate, and I can tell you it's much higher than that now. But we have to consider that if nearly 50% of the people didn't earn the 2022 living wage, that means that nearly half of the people living in Cornwall can't afford to live here. Next slide, please. The affordability crisis isn't ending anytime soon, and more people are one bill away from being put into very vulnerable positions where their entire livelihood could be put in jeopardy. This program has tangible and quick results to meet people where they are now by giving them a fresh start on an outstanding bill and an unforeseen large expense. This year, again, this fund helped fathers get access to their children for the first time in months because they had stable housing. It provided relief to an individual who had been living without hydro for months. It has rehomed individuals who were experiencing homelessness. Our ask this year was that our city council be able to find $200,000 in their budget. That's an increase of 9% from the $180,000 that was dedicated to this region. But that increase is to reflect inflation and, of course, the increase and rise in demand on our agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to questions and comments from council, just have a motion on the table to receive the presentation. Councillor Ngunjo, Councillor Sabare, questions and comments. Councillor Good.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much, Juliet, for this presentation. It is absolutely evident that in our community, we have an increasing need. It is tighter and tighter every year, every month, it feels like, for people to live. I am hearing of ongoing rent evictions, albeit on smaller scales than what we were seeing during the pandemic, and higher rent prices. I'm glad you started this presentation with remarking that something along the lines of this is your money goes the furthest in this kind of program. And I think it's evident we don't have a solution to our housing crisis. It is not our housing crisis, it is a national crisis. I think it's bordering on a global crisis, frankly. But this is a program that can help alleviate some of the pressures that we face as a city and that we face as a region to support these individuals who need a warm place to live. It is not a small ask, but I think it is a very reasonable ask. And I think this is something that we will see pay off. We know we need to support the vulnerable people in our community, and I commend you personally, but I commend the work that your organization is doing in collaboration with so many other important organizations in administering this program. You're doing great work. I'm so happy to see the willingness of our community to support people in need, and I will support this ask. So thank you very much for your work.
Councillor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess full disclosure, I didn't declare conflict of interest, but full disclosure, I have the privilege to get to work with Juliette Labossière on a number of projects, not this one. That's why I'm talking. And this woman is a force to be reckoned with. Her heart is bigger than probably she would hope it is, because it means she is putting so much time, effort, energy into supporting the most vulnerable people in our community, you know, and going without meals, I'm sure, and just putting this community first before herself time and time again. So just going to start with that. Thank you. This program itself is like one of her brainchilds, one of these amazing ideas that she's come up with to really fill the gaps that the current housing programs that are offered by the city could not address. And these are programs that are often sort of legislated by the province, and so this way, with what is already offered by the city and to the city and the counties, it is addressing those who are falling between those cracks. And there's a lot of those folks who are falling between the cracks more and more now with the affordability crisis, the shrinking middle class. So many of us are one crisis away from having to pick between paying our housing bill or buying groceries this week. Folks that never anticipated having to make those decisions are having to. And I want to mention that some of those folks were people probably annually donating to organizations like the United Way, and can't anymore because there's no disposable income for those folks. And so when the United Way is coming to us as a municipality to help support those programs, and they never really have before, well, this is a situation we've never seen before either, where I'm sure their donor database is shrinking, unfortunately, because people are having to choose, you know, groceries over a donation to the United Way, rightfully so. Couple of questions, maybe just to elaborate on a couple of things that you've mentioned. You briefly mentioned the loan program, which I think is excellent. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the very first year that we launched this project solely with donor dollars, it was 100% grant money. And so individuals in need came to us and we simply paid out. Those donors came to me and challenged me to try to find a sustainable way to maintain this fund in the long run, not 100% recognizing that probably is not a possibility, but trying my best. And so I did a lot of investigation into small loans that exist internationally, small loans that exist in the province of Ontario, and developed something that is completely unique. And so we are potentially one of the only regions that is doing micro loans to individuals through a financial institution. So we partner with your credit union. So individuals get the lowest market rate loan possible because the United Way guarantees those loans. And it's an ability for a section of our population that often struggles with credit to actually be able to build credit. So the intake for every individual that goes through the last resort program includes an evaluation if they have the capacity to hold a loan and earn credit, or if they are in such deep crisis that only a grant would be the solution.
Thank you. And just another piece, you mentioned that you supported through this program an individual that owned their home. And so if you can tell us a little bit more about the criteria or the flexibility within the criteria to access this, because whether you own you were lucky enough 15 years ago to get a mortgage, or you're renting, this crisis we're dealing with isn't selective with who it's choosing. You may be able to own a home, but you are likely at risk of losing the home, depending on the situation. So can you explain how there's flexibility within the criteria to use this program?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, when this program was developed, Councillor Hebert is correct. It was sort of my brainchild that came through multiple discussions with multiple agencies. But its true rollout and its intake process was developed in collaboration with multiple players, including the City of Cornwall Social Services, to ensure that we were not duplicating any service or any funding that existed and could be available. And so the intake process is quite complex and ensures, are you getting all of the government rebates possible that could avoid you finding you in this situation? Are you utilizing services in the community that could avoid this? And many, if not all, but many, I can say confidently, of the subsidies you do not qualify as soon as you identify as a home owner. And so one-time mortgage payments for individuals that don't have that insurance or are living a situation that does not qualify for their insurance is vital for us, particularly with our seniors that are able to stay in their homes, as we do not want to thrust them into today's housing market and rental rates that are far above the mortgage rates that they're currently holding.
Thank you so much for everything you do for this community and for this presentation. I will be very happy to support this when it comes back to council.
Any further questions or comments from council? Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, thanks to Juliet for the presentation. I just want to, not doubting your figures, but what really jumps off the page, I mean, and I think I heard it right, 33,337,000, 50% of people in Cornwall make that or less. Did I hear that right?
That's correct. And we did publish those figures in the standard freeholder. They contested those, and we went back and worked through the numbers with them. Those are true figures,
Yeah.
yes.
Just in case somebody asked me, where do they come from?
Statistics Canada.
Really?
Yeah. So it's numbers for individuals who are earning an income in our region.
That is astonishing. You know, I think of Dickinson's best of times, worst of times, in the Tale of Two Cities, and really we're living that because some people have it very well, and a lot of people are sinking. And somebody alluded to the shrinking middle class, and it's so true. When I grew up, the middle class there wasn't much difference. Now, it's such a wide range. My daughter was telling me, who lives in downtown Toronto, was telling me the other day we were talking about this very issue because she's very involved in food banks and homelessness, and she talked about a couple, senior citizens, $2,000 a month rent for their apartment. No, $1,200 a month rent for the apartment, and their total income's $2,000 a month. And they don't even know each other, but they moved in. The idea was, and more and more people are doing that, seniors especially, where they take a roommate in and they share the apartment because they can't survive any other way. And it's that and food banks to keep them living. And it really takes away all hope. But anyway, it's fair. I think you told us the last time you were here that nobody ever reneged on a loan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are still successful.
Good, that's good to hear. Okay, thanks.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lisa, in the report, I was looking for what I had been told about a week and a half ago, that you have people that are working one job, 2 jobs, yet can't afford food and go to the Agape Center in order to feed their kids and their family. Can you comment on that, please? And would you know the percentage of people that that are in that situation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will do my best to comment, but not being executive director of the food bank, I don't have that full data on me. But I'll bring it back to what Councillor McIntosh was just referring to. If we consider that 50% of the individuals who are working in Cornwall, 1 job, 2 jobs, some multiple jobs, are still earning below the living wage, it goes without a doubt that to make ends meet, they do need to utilize food bank services to get by. In recent discussions with Agape, Lisa, the executive director, did inform me that food bank usage went up well over 40% in the last year, which included a large number of families who have 2 working parents who came off of food bank usage when they became employed. But the cost of living crisis is driving them back.
Thank you for that answer. I was shocked when I heard it, and whoever has a little bit of extra money to help out, United Way, please. Thank you for the answer. And it's not an answer I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear everyone is safe, but it's today's world. So.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Bossier, thank you very much for the update on the program. I recall your presentation last year. Certainly the importance of this program has only grown since then. Look forward to discussing further funds to your organization when the time is right. But thank you. All in favor of receiving this report? Carried. Thank you.
Our next presentation is Encampment Update Presentation. And we have our own Melissa Morgan and Lisa Smith joining us from Human Services.
Mr. Mayor, as the team is setting up, I'd love to say a few introductory words. First off, want to commend and thank Lisa and Melissa who've worked extra hours with everyone in the community to get to the point we were on last Friday in opening Parisian Manor. It's been a journey, council members and the public, to get there and having a winter housing plan, and the team will share that with you, what it means and the next steps. But really, I've begun in this role just over 2 months ago, and I think one of the first meetings I had was with the housing team and the mayor. We looked at housing options for the winter at one of those first meetings, and the team continued to advance, and I know we all would have wanted to have a winter housing option sooner, but I want you to know that every rock was turned, and obviously, even if we all wanted to be earlier, the success of having a winter housing option now in place is kudos to Lisa and Melissa, and obviously
Madame Labossière, who's been alongside the city's housing team along the way to support this winter housing initiative. So, Mr. Mayor, if I'll turn it over to Melissa, and I know they have a presentation which will guide us through how we got there, what it means, and looking forward.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. We did ask Juliet to join us this evening because this isn't solely housing services initiative. Juliet has brought quite a bit to the table in terms of the United Way support, and so we wanted to make sure she was here at the table as well to give you some information on our winter solution. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Council, Mayor, and CAO. This information that you see before you discusses the activity that has been undertaken by the Housing Services Department, generally in our approach to encampments and folks that are struggling with housing within our community. Some new updates. So just to advise that our essentially housing crisis team does visit the encampment on a weekly basis. What we are seeing is encampment residents have been declining, but we are still seeing some folks that are choosing to reside in tents despite weather changes, so the numbers are in flux. There was a third reported encampment that we were made aware of. However, at this time, those residents, we believe, have either returned to the tent encampments or that have been housed through other options that we're working on as a department. We've also been connecting with a variety of community support services to join the housing team at encampments. So again, we have been trying to reach out to other organizations in the community to try to have them come and join us as we visit and bring some additional supports. What we also know is beyond what we see in the encampments is a strong hidden homeless population as well. So we are seeing at least 2 to 3 residents every day that are reporting to the housing office as homeless or extremely housing insecure that we are attempting to support and serve. A couple things just to be aware of that, you know, we actively work to try to respect the choices of the individuals and how they may choose or would like to stay within the tent encampments, and that, you know, essentially we do try to work to coach and support around services, but again, respect those choices. And we also look at all possible options to help residents. There is no one solution to this issue. This is a national crisis, and communities across the country are struggling to come to the best solution on how to deal with this. And we always have to consider that there are unique circumstances that affect each municipality and the best way that we can approach and resolve these issues. Sorry, Mano. Thank you. So, the update on the Winter Housing Initiative, which is now at the former Parisian Manor. We have entered into a commercial lease arrangement with a local business owner to provide bachelor-style units to folks that are either residing in encampments or homeless within our community. We have met all necessary fire and building codes. So again, that was a process that we were working through just to ensure the safety of the individuals who may be residing in those facilities. And at this time, I just would like to recognize the support of our fire services department, as well as the staff who work in building, planning, and bylaw, have been essential to supporting us through this process. Residents will be expected to connect to existing services within the communities around meal programs and other supports. And as we are working with them to secure income through sources like potentially Ontario Works or ODSP or whatever might work for them in terms of their circumstances, there will be rent geared to income rent that they will be paying towards their residency at this facility. At this point, we have 15 encampment residents that have either been permanently housed in community housing or at the Stepping Stone facility. Again, we do try to respect the choices of those who are currently residing in the encampments, and despite our best efforts, folks may still choose that as an option. And again, we would like to respect that choice. Just before I pass it over to Juliet, there's a couple other things I'd like to highlight. So last Friday, we had a very concentrated effort among the housing team and our partner with the United Way to move residents out of the encampment and into our new winter housing facility. That was again, cross-city departmental collaboration. We had support from transit that provided city busing to be able to move folks and their belongings. I really just would like to recognize the work of the housing team that have been supporting these encampments on an ongoing basis, generally supporting work around housing within our community, and the exceptional commitment they all made on Friday to try to get everybody, as many folks as we could, into this facility, housed into a room with a bed, some furniture, and again, just I would be remiss if I didn't just really deeply thank and appreciate that team. A couple things also just to be aware of. This is not a shelter. This is a better, more inclusive solution. This initiative has been developed from months of planning to ensure that life safety and building safety were in place. And it is essentially modeled after the United Way's Out of the Cold program that they've been working on for quite a few years to get up and going. So we just want to recognize, again, based on a well-researched model from our partner. As we move forward, if we don't get all the folks from the encampment into the facility, that any vacant beds will be filled with residents who are currently on our by names list. And the by names list is something that we keep track of to have a better sense of who in our community is homeless and what kind of supports they may need. So again, we will be looking into that to make sure that this facility is fully utilized at this time. Right now, we know that currently our by name list sits at around about 100 to 120 people. It does fluctuate just depending on what we are seeing in the community, just to kind of make you aware of some numbers around that initiative. And at this point, I'll pass it over to Juliette.
Thank you. A little bit of overlay, but I wish to read what I wrote. So the Stepping Stone project is not a new concept or a last-minute solution. It is born from weeks of collaborative work with a large number of partners from this region. And the roots of this project lie deep within the years of work of the United Way, Centraide, SDNG, and what we have been doing to raise awareness and to find solutions for our growing housing crisis. The Stepping Stone project is a model of housing that is not a simple Band-Aid solution. It is not a shelter. It is constructed around proven models of housing options and is much more profound in its work. It is filled with dignity for the individuals who will reside there. Transitional and/or supportive housing units like the ones we have just collaboratively launched are meeting your own objectives as a city to obtain Built for Zero, a step beyond housing first. Allowing the United Way Centraide of SDNG to bring our partners from neighboring communities like Akwesasne, many charitable and nonprofit organizations from around this region, all onto an equal playing field with the city, allowed each of us to take leadership in the sections of work in which we excel. This process did take time, but this time was needed to ensure we did this right together. Not only are we starting to fill the voids the United Way Centraide SDNG has identified in the housing continuum for our region, but we are doing it with projects built on models that are proven to not only treat our vulnerable population with more decency, but if we base our projections on the many studies worldwide on similar housing first initiatives, this will also save our community money in the long run. It was a relief for the United Way to find an ally in the city of Cornwall on this project, and together we were able to mobilize the capacity that was needed to envision, plan, launch, and now run this project. No one organization or entity in this city holds the mandate to house individuals experiencing homelessness. But we have yet again proven that our region is one that takes care of its own, that can band together when needed, and makes what sometimes seems impossible, possible. We have all taken our own portion of responsibility in this crisis. This taking of responsibility includes a schedule of various community partners who will be operating within this facility to offer mental health, addictions, and counseling services, including Indigenous-specific and trauma-informed care, to the willing residents of the Stepping Stone project. Thank you to the too long to mention list of partners that got us to Friday, move-in day. But a big thanks in particular to the trust and partnership between the City of Cornwall and the United Way Centraide SDNG to move as quickly as was possible in our region to open this location. Just quickly on this slide, you will have a quick glimpse into the facility as we were setting up. And the main level includes a common area where residents can be together for a meal, a meeting, or social time. It also includes access to small appliances so that the residents can be self-sufficient for their meals when not accessing the various community food options available to them. Each private room, thanks again to partnerships with private and non-for-profit organizations from this region, and thanks to some very generous United Way Centraide SDNG donors, are equipped with all the basic necessities that would represent a bachelor apartment. Setup of the rooms happened very quickly in the last days last week. When we felt we were getting close to signing that lease, we were in setting up so that there would be no delays. And it was only possible thanks to an army of volunteers that stayed very late into the night on Thursday that included community partners and their family members. A big thanks to all.
Certainly, as Juliet and Lisa have indicated, this is our winter housing solution. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, we are working on many housing solutions as this housing crisis does impact municipalities differently. One of the things that we have been fortunate enough to do is purchase a former public school. And so this is our update on longer-term solutions beyond the winter solution. It is the former Vincent Massey Public School located at 1520 Cumberland. The initial intent for that the current building, is to create 9 supportive housing units from the classrooms that are already existing there. The building will feature necessary services and partnerships to stabilize residents to prepare for permanent housing. Planning to include a health component as well, so we are hoping that some of the space that we have within the facility may lend itself to some type of health practitioner. We have had an initial meeting with partners like police, EMS, fire, bylaw, our CAO, and the United Way. And it is the intent of this group to ensure that anything that is going to be constructed there or anybody housed there will be done in a manner that fits all of the life safety requirements, including community well-being and safety. We're also investigating up to 20 sleeping cabins or transitional housing. So you've heard a lot this evening about shelters, supportive housing, transitional housing. So I just want to take a minute and provide you with a bit of a definition on those different scenarios. So transitional housing, in this context as a sleeping cabin, we would consider that much like a tiny home. It's a rental housing with an immediate step between that emergency shelter and permanent housing. Whereas supportive housing is the same type of interim or short-term housing, but with more supportive, and more supports available to the individuals living in those units, depending on what their individual needs are. Whereas shelters are typically a first-come, first-serve overnight model with individuals coming to the site early in the evening and leaving the next morning, and they're more of a cot dormitory-style setting that also serves meals. So that is not the intent for us to create a shelter at Massey Place. We will be providing other amenities within the facility. It's our intent to move our Meals on Wheels program from Glenstordon Lodge to this facility, as well as creating some programming space with the existing gym, and for us to also create a drop-in center for other individuals that might be either experiencing homelessness or need some additional supports with community partners that we're hoping to also bring in there, and we're hoping to leverage the community partners that we are working with now in our winter housing solution to bring those continued supports into our longer-term vision with Massey Place, and be able to serve the community holistically from that center as well. As part of ongoing consultations, meetings will continue to be held with individuals within the area, including school officials, residents within the area, and as we develop a communication plan, we will be providing that information as it becomes available. Just on a final note, as Lisa has indicated, I would like to take another opportunity to thank the many community partners who have helped and will continue to help with this initiative. the many other city departments that have assisted with this project. It goes beyond housing and fire. There are many city departments who have come together to help with this as well as Juliet from the United Way of SD&G and Lisa Smith, our Housing Services Manager, and again, the many staff at Housing Services who have collaborated to ensure that this initiative has come to fruition.
Thank you. Before we get to questions, can I have a motion on the floor to receive the presentation, please? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Bennett. Questions, comments from council? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to thank you, women, for the wonderful work you're doing on behalf of all of us. You're doing the work, and I think you're just doing a super job. But I've got a few questions about some of the terms you're using and exactly what they mean. Now, for example, when you say you'll have supportive units, does that mean in terms of physical accessibility, or does it mean other services, or exactly what is a supportive unit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically a supportive unit is outside agencies coming in to support based on the individual's needs. However, all of the 9 supportive units within the building will be barrier-free.
Okay. And are you going to have staff regularly in this building, or do you just anticipate managing the flow of outside help coming in as needed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is our intent to relocate our housing crisis team. Right now it's currently 3 staff members to that facility to work there Monday to Friday. We will look to expand other staffing in that facility as the model grows. We also will be reaching out to some of our other community partners to see what they can offer in terms of services. We will have some office space that's available for hoteling if other agencies want to come in to either offer services or visit clients.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds so very open-ended. Now, you use the term by names list, and at one point I thought that this simply meant people who were living in encampments with whom you've been in contact and with whom obviously you're working to provide better alternatives. But given you've got 120 people on the by names list, obviously there's a bigger catchment. Can you just explain, please, or describe what that catchment includes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the by names list is meant to be a comprehensive repository of all the folks in our community who are homeless, which means they could be doing couch surfing, which would make them provisionally housed, meaning they're bumping around between friends and family. It also means we have essentially we have a lot of folks in the community who are homeless that we don't actually see. Keep in mind that 120 does also encapsulate all of the residents who may be in the counties as well, who have been identified as homeless. So again, it's not always just the individuals that you see. There's a lot of folks who are experiencing this issue that you just don't physically see, but they're out there.
Right. And when you mentioned the counties, I was going to ask you if you have an establishment out there, but I know there's a center in Morrisburg and certainly in Mountain. House of Lazarus probably does many of the things that you are establishing yourselves to do and already do. So I guess I want to commend you for mentioning especially that you'll have a drop-in center at the North End in Massey Place, because it seems to me the immediate help that people can receive, whether it's for a meal or other kinds of help, they're downtown. Like I think of Center 104 and I think of the Agape Center, but there's nothing like that that I know of in the North End. So this would be a very welcome addition to that community. And
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can just clarify drop-in center, the intent is not to serve meals out of this. We will, certainly we have some very strong organizations with the Agape Center and Center 105 who provide that service. The drop-in center would be more things that are perhaps missing within the community, assistance with ID, perhaps even just to come in. The comment was made earlier about whether or not there's the opportunity in extreme heat, extreme cold during the day where individuals could come and either partake of other services that are there, speak to other individuals, or just come in under the extreme heat or the extreme cold. But it will be a very structured drop-in center that is only open specific times of the day.
But it wouldn't necessarily be for one stable population then? People would come and go or access it?
Yeah, potentially. There more than likely would not be an eligibility requirement to be able to access services out of that drop-in program.
And it strikes me with that you probably have to give a lot of help to people in this establishment just with filling out application forms, because you stress that you want people to be accessing services that are currently already out there. And what are some of the barriers that keep people from accessing them now that you hope to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a lot of times it's the complicated nature of the application. Perhaps there may be literacy barriers that are there. Some of the forms are definitely, they can be confusing in nature. And so certainly that would be something we've, as an example, we've spoken to our elected officials about perhaps providing some assistance there to apply for other forms of benefits. Federal benefits, those types of things. So the possibilities are endless with this drop-in center and the number of organizations we could work with to bring in those supports for individuals who may be experiencing or struggling with some of those issues.
Okay, and then my last question would be this. If you do manage to add sleeping cabins, for example, to this locale, do you anticipate having a consultation with the surrounding community or the general public beyond council meeting like this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's definitely our intent to engage in consultations, further consultations. We have started some of those consultations, but we are early in the process. And so as we develop that communication strategy, further communications will ensue.
Well, if I can help you in any way, please let me know, because I think all these plans sound absolutely wonderful, and I support you 100%.
And just wanted to jump in maybe on the consultation part. We are entering the move-in phase of Parisian Manor as of last Friday, so it's going well. But through that exercise, there's a lot of conversation. So the team's been extremely busy, and we need to give them time through the winter period to truly engage in consultation and expand the partnership. I know, for example, I owe conversations with Cornwall Hospital to see what services they might have and if they can be a partner at the site. So there's a number of partners like that. When we say there is space, the team is diligent in making sure that there is space for partners. But we recognize there's a lot of work through the winter to advance some of these strategies.
That's a good thing, because the public is so anxious that we do what needs to be done and beyond. So you're the front line of getting that work done.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'm glad the point was brought up about communication, because that's going to be key, especially with the surrounding neighborhood around Massey Place in particular. I'm just wondering about the Meals on Wheels program. One of the things that has been brought up is the increase of traffic from this. So I don't know how many meals are taken care of every day. I don't know how many volunteers there are, how many cars will be going in and out of there. Like, is that really going to be a traffic concern? Because it seems to me like it's not, we don't have 40 drivers running around. So how does that kind of work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly it is something we are considering. Keeping in mind that, it was previously a public school, many parents dropping kids off, teachers, so on and so forth. I'm not sure there'll be any more traffic necessarily. The parking lot is fairly limited in the number of individuals. There's also an easement off of 15th Street that could be accessed that would hopefully make it easier for traffic off of Cumberland.
Okay, so that was one of the concerns I've been hearing from people in the area. The other one is was around the drop-in center. There was no understanding of what that meant, so I'm glad that was explained tonight. Some of the concerns I'm hearing are kind of frustrating, because I feel like when the communication comes out, all these answers, they're making conclusions because they don't have the information, right? So the more we can, and I understand we just opened up this facility, and so that the communication is going to take till September. We're not opening this in February, so there's time. So to the people that have the questions, keep asking them. And as we get further into this process, then we'll be able to get your answers. But this is something the community needs. So you know, it's, maybe a better location. Well, find me a better location. I don't know what that means. So this looks like it will house what we were hoping to do. The property allows us to do possibly those 20 sleeping cabins, which, as mentioned earlier, is not a homeless shelter. It's a place for somebody to actually go, call home until something more permanent comes up. So I like this plan. I like where it's going, and the communication is key. So when we have something to share, let's share it and keep the public as informed as possible going forward so that we can alleviate some of those fears. Because I really think once we get the information, a lot of people will feel like, will understand that their fears were maybe a little bit unfounded. So, yeah, communication. Let's just keep that going. Thanks.
Further questions, comments? Councillor McIntosh?
Yes, was Deb Center ever considered in this equation?
Through Mr. In what respect?
Well, they're housing about 500 homeless people, the New Canadians, or people in, was it ever, their facility ever considered as a place to house people?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the initiative with the Dev Center is with respect to asylum claimants, and that's a federal initiative, and so that is funded and organized by IRCC. The only involvement the municipality has is typically from or the majority of it from a human services perspective, if individuals qualify. I am not sure that that would have been a financially feasible solution for us to enter into in the short term or the long term.
Okay, I heard the housing minister on TV the other day talking about how the federal housing plans are working quite nicely. And, the cabins, what's a hybrid cabin? Is that the one that has all the services?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it would be considered almost like a tiny home, but it is very small and modest in nature. Certainly it is basically what you would almost see as the equivalent to one of the rooms that we are establishing at the former Parisian Site Manor. It's winterized, it's got a bed, it's got a small table, microwave, fridge. It's insulated, so it can withstand the cold winters. It is certainly what many of the municipalities or service managers in Ontario are doing. We are not the first to come to the table with this. We are actually looking at other service managers and what their struggles have been or their barriers have been so that we can learn from them as we move forward with this. But certainly it is a highly sought after option for many municipalities.
Yeah, Kitchener has 50. And what they've discovered is it's morphed from transitional to permanent. And in 3.5 years, only 6 people have moved out of those cabins. Would we be in that same situation?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's possible. Certainly transition is meant to be defined based on the individual's needs. It could be anywhere from a very short-term stay to a longer-term stay, but the intent is that they transition from these sleeping cabins to more permanent accommodations. Certainly with the efforts of our housing services team to help them transition from those sleeping cabins to a more permanent solution, possibly within our own community housing portfolio.
Okay. And would those cabins be available for people in Cornwall or Cornwall and SDNG?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have the only criteria we have on our centralized wait list right now is for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. We are certainly looking to expand that to include our by names list as well. And so we would look to house individuals from our by names list or perhaps from the winter housing solution into those cabins first. And as they become available, I'm going to be honest, those cabins will probably be fully accounted for, and then we will still have people waiting because we can't meet the demand right now.
Yes.
And unless we build, our housing revitalization plan gave several hundred units we needed to build to meet the demand. That's not physically possible.
I don't know if this was at the housing conference you were at, but I heard an expert on TV talk about how it took years of neglect isn't going to be reversed overnight. It's going to take a long time.
I would just, through you, Mr. Mayor, like to add on to that. We are also the United Way. We do chair our regional housing and homelessness working group. and are looking at alternatives similar to Massey Place on a smaller scale with some of our rural partners. So it is not a sole responsibility of the City of Cornwall to be addressing this issue, and so we are looking at a larger rollout plan. And to touch on your concern about long-term stays in transitional housing, I'd have to say that we are making waves in the province regarding our last resort fund and our ability to be nimble and move people out of those transitional housing units and into stable housing. A lot of municipalities are taking a look at our program, and so I think this is a success for us to ensure that people can move on when they find themselves financially able to do so.
Ms. Sale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add to the responses from the team. We can give examples across Ontario, but it's pretty much the same across the country, where if there's no vacancies, there's no capacity to move folks from vulnerable settings, that it'd be shelter, that it'd be the example of tiny homes, into more permanent housing. I think if we the community, we council, we the city can stay focused on constructing new affordable units, we'll be in a better position. And then the movement in support for immediate response with the tiny homes and then more stable housing with the supports that are needed is achievable.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask a bit of an odd question, and I don't know if I've seen the answer. So these tiny homes, are they going to be hooked up to sewer and water?
Through you,
How are we providing?
through you, Mr. Mayor, no, they will not. There are no washroom facilities inside the sleeping cabins. However, the intent is at Massey Place to convert some of the old washrooms, and much like the drop-in center, have it available with laundry facilities, shower facilities, so that either those coming into the drop-in center or those that are living in the tiny cabins will be coming into that facility to be able to use those amenities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Dupel.
Just to follow up to my colleague's question, Mr. Mayor. So what are we looking at for overnight to be able to access the building at Massey Place 24/7?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so certainly that would be something we will work with the architect. Once we have our architect and we explain where the cabins may be situated and what the amenities look like, we will look to understand what that may mean in terms of access to the building or access to just a particular area, and how individuals can access that particular area during which times of the day. So it could mean an exterior access that is accessible by their key fob or their key to get into the sleeping cabins. Certainly there are other factors that we need to consider before that solution is identified, and we want to bring other partners to the table to make sure that, again, we're providing a safe, secure location for everybody that will be living there.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have, through the transitional units, I was just wondering, not the transitional units, sorry, the cabins. So once appropriate housing is found, so is there like a time, will they be sort of, like once affordable housing is found for them, will they be told that they have to be out by a certain date and take that unit, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be stipulated in the, so it would be a different agreement we would enter into with individuals that are residing in those sleeping cabins, more of an occupancy type agreement as opposed to an actual rental agreement.
Right.
The occupancy agreement, much like at Parisian Manor, it's a similar agreement that we're entering into. It does provide for, once there is permanent housing, a particular time for them to be relocating. And we would look to create that as short a window possible for us to be able to transition that unit over to somebody else.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ngunjo.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Having a facility like Le Parisien Manor is something very great because it's situated in the center and it's close of other services. That's great. I applaud that. Concerning the Vincent Massey Place, I would like to tell you that I have some concern, and I'm not alone. I have been contacted by a lot of residents concerned by the fact that these facilities situated near schools. And I would like to ask you if it is possible to take time to discuss deeply with other stakeholders to take great decision for this project. Then we can avoid further problems that can arise after this facility being implemented. Is it something possible? I would like.
So,
Yes.
so Councillor, I'll jump in on that. Council did choose the selection of the site in terms of the purchasing, and the team is working diligently to develop the model. It is early days, and we want to make sure that the public is aware of the intentions for that site. The team and I are committed to being available, creating the relationships and the working groups that are needed, so that we're responsive, so that we're transparent, and so that we're able to really recognize the needs and the concerns of the neighbor, but also achieve council's objectives as you're seeing the urgency for us to have the appropriate housing plans.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, Lisa and I were fortunate enough last week to attend a conference. And one of the sessions that we attended was very much about this, where 3 different municipalities or organizations had created very similar sites or similar facilities that were either former schools or in a school district, and were very successful in being able to open that facility with ongoing involvement from the community to be part of the solution and to provide supports for the successful implementation of it. So to the CAO's earlier point, as the winter progresses and we have evolved this plan more, we will be providing additional consultations to see how we can involve the community in helping us make this a successful implementation.
Okay, but please go ahead with the consultation because it's very, very important. Even that, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have other problems that are gonna come out due to the fact that the schools and this facility are closed. So to avoid any other problems, we need to a very frank consultation with the resident about this issue. I would encourage you for that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Good.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to commend the hard work that's gone into all of this planning. I can only imagine the amount of time and deep emotions that have gone into this. I doubt that this has been easy to get this set up, and especially in light of the recent death at one of the encampments. So I want to commend you for the work. We don't have a magic wand to fix the problems in our community or in our world, and sometimes we wish we do. Massey Place, I am excited about on certain elements. I think we recognize as a council and as a city that housing is incredibly important and that we have a severe shortage. Providing the opportunity for transitional housing so that we can allow folks to have stable, long-term, a supportive place to live, I believe that is of utmost importance. And frankly, I've heard similar concerns as my colleague in regard to the location of these units. And I'm gonna give my 2 cents here, and I have some other questions about it too. I think when it comes to a transitional housing or a housing where you know that someone's got a key and it's their room, there's a sense of security. And that sense of security is something that when I've heard people talking about emergency shelters, that's been really where some of the problems lie, is that they're having to bring their things in and out. There's not a guarantee that they're going to have a space. So I think that this alleviates a lot of that safety concern, and it provides something that is safe and stable. I don't see the people staying in that house as being less deserving than anyone else. And I think, frankly, following the discussions and the presentation from the United Way, it's clear that a lot of these people are working, they're trying, people are trying just to find a place to live. I appreciate, however, the concerns about the school district, about the vulnerability. I like the idea of the tiny homes, and I've been to conferences where I've seen some of them. But the notion of them not having bathrooms to me is highly problematic. People are not going, I will say most of my male counterparts probably will not walk into a building to urinate. And we can all paint a picture of that in our mind. I see that as being a real issue. If we are going to have units outside of this building, tiny homes, call them what you want, I do believe that we need to find some kind of solution when it comes to the bathroom. Something that will not potentially expose residents, students, the like, to potentially people urinating or even maybe defecating outside of their cabins. And I don't want to be grim with that, but I want to be real about it. So I am so glad that this is in the planning phase. I think the units that we have planned there are great, and I think that we need to put some more thinking into how we can develop that piece of land so that we can ensure that people have housing. I want to ask about the drop-in center, so or the drop-in, whatever you want to call it. You mentioned assistance with ID and warming and cooling. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on what you envision that drop-in center to be? And before you answer, I guess I will say that my concern has to do with the transient nature and the nature of changing the safety element from being somewhere where people are housed and there's a key and it feels safe to being somewhere where there's an in and out flow of people who aren't necessarily living there. So can you talk a bit more about what that looks like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, I really think it's early days in terms of the drop-in center. This has already fluctuated and changed since we brought this to council in June for approval, and that's based on lessons learned from the winter housing solution. I mean, I would hate to give you more information today and then it changes again tomorrow. Certainly, I'll go out and say this, that as a society, we need to stop stigmatizing those who are living in homelessness as being criminals or people who are going to cause problems. Many of the individuals we are already working with are working. They lead productive lives, other than the fact that they are making a difficult choice because they can't afford to pay rent. They're choosing to pay for other basic life necessities. And I think once as a society we stop criminalizing those that are experiencing homelessness, we will be better off and we will be better able to accept all housing solutions.
Thank you for that response. I'm going to ask another not so easy question. And I want to ask this because I imagine that this is a burning question on the minds of many people. Now, this has to do with the transition from some of the residents who've been living in encampments into the transitional housing that we have. Do we have a sufficient number of rooms at present to house those that we know of currently who are in the encampments?
I'll let Lisa take that question, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So based on what our team has been seeing out in the field, that if every person who is currently in an encampment that we know of wanted to come into the Stepping Stone project, we would be able to take them. So we specifically chose the number of rooms based on what we were seeing. So we would be able to make that happen. Again, though, that is that our team has seen and identified and has built a relationship with and know where they are.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear that you're building those relationships and building up that trust that comes. My follow-up question to that is for those individuals, and I understand you began this presentation talking about respecting their choice, and I appreciate that very much. Do we have any ideas of next steps in terms of what happens if people choose not to actually accept the option of moving into these transitional units?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what I can say is our team is actively working. They were actually just down there this morning to try to encourage folks to come into the facility. You know, again, there's trust, there's community, things like that we're very conscientious of, that we want to help build in this new facility, and it will take them some time to feel that it's a spot for them. So we are actively working as much as we can to pull folks into that service. So that's our current plan at this time. I think until we know how many folks will make a final decision about not coming with us, I don't think we can specifically answer that at this time.
That's fair. Well, I am glad to hear that we do have sufficient housing in order to be able to house the individuals who we know that are at the encampments. I appreciate the hard work that you've done and the difficulty of the situation. So thank you very much.
Further questions or comments? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just say that, you know, the solution that we are providing at Massey Place with the sleeping cabins has been a tested model in many other organizations. It has not been an issue that we have heard of so far, and certainly, again, other municipalities have gone through this, other organizations have gone through this, and they have provided some lessons learned to other municipalities who are wanting to move into these solutions as well. So, you know, I think over the winter months, we will be in a better place to be able to collectively ensure that either all questions are answered, or that we have a solution that everybody will feel respected that's there, or the community at large will feel safe in the solutions that have been provided there.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, Ms. Morgan, Madame Labossiere, I want to thank you sincerely, just echoing the comments from the CAO and my colleagues, for all the work you've put into this. I know it's been a lot of hours, well beyond your typical work week, well into weekends and everything else, to get these two projects off the ground. But the impact it's making is measurable and significant, and there's still a lot of work to do, but it certainly has set the roadmap for the way forward for us. So I appreciate all the time and effort you put into this, along with your teams. Thank you. Motion to receive the presentation, or correction, calling the vote on the motion to receive the presentation. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, is the Interim Control Bylaw, Emergency Shelter Policy and Regulation Study and Community Engagement, with the following recommendation: that Council accept this report and give direction to administration on the scope and design of the study of land use planning policies and regulations applicable to emergency shelters within the City of Cornwall, including community engagement, to be undertaken as part of the study.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. You will see on the screen two professionals joining us. I'd like to introduce them. We have Paul Hicks from Republica Urbanism, an urban planner, as well as Emma Blanchard from Legal Services through BLG. I want to thank them for joining us this evening. Before I turn it over to Paul for his presentation, I do think it's important for all of us to recognize the important decision from council at the last meeting to enact the interim control bylaw. I'll turn it over to Paul to refresh our memories and give the context to that decision, as well as provide to members of council and the public this evening a bit of the next steps on what the study scope and the engagement will look like over the coming year. So, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I was wondering perhaps how to begin the presentation this evening in terms of a backgrounder, but it certainly seems from the presentations that I've just had the opportunity to sit through that this particular council was very aware of some of the challenging nature of homelessness and housing people and households that are experiencing homelessness, particularly in the face of the exponential growth of the problem. In way of background, though, and building on, I think, what a lot of councils probably heard very recently, in recent years, we've seen issues around homelessness have grown more complex as the number of households experiencing homelessness in Canada has grown significantly. Additionally, households experiencing homelessness are tending to remain homeless for longer periods of time than in the past, all of which has been exacerbated by a growing opioid crisis, with homeless populations particularly hard hit. Cornwall has also seen a relatively new segment of homelessness in Canada, with refugee claimants from irregular border crossings arriving on our doorstep. These populations also come with unique needs and legal status that often differ from more traditional scenarios of homelessness. These emerging trends in homelessness are placing increased pressures on existing support systems, including emergency shelters, food banks, and mental health and addiction services. They also require service providers to rethink traditional approaches to housing homeless people and households experiencing homelessness. And some of the new approaches to addressing homelessness, and we've heard about them tonight, including housing first models. They also include harm reduction programming facilities and rapid housing initiatives, which you've also heard tonight in the form of tiny homes, all have direct implications on the way we plan for our communities and emergency shelters and housing for populations and households experiencing homelessness. So while I think this council's heard a lot tonight about some of the immediate steps that the city has needed to take to address this very urgent issue in the community, I'd like to turn council's attention to some of the longer term, how we can address this matter in the longer term. And one of the ways that certainly this council can address housing and homelessness in the longer term is through the development of a robust planning framework in our official plan and our zoning bylaws that will allow council to properly plan in the long term for the types of facilities that this growing segment of our population requires. And that's what led us to the discussion about the implementation of an interim control bylaw, in which we were taking an opportunity to take a pause in the issuance of building permits and the development of new shelter facilities to make sure that we were approaching this in a comprehensive and holistic manner through our planning documents. And so we've implemented the interim control bylaw, which would pause the development of new homeless emergency shelters for a period of up to 1 year. I would want to reiterate for this council that notwithstanding that these interim control bylaws are in place for 1 year at a time, we certainly believe that we can have a planning study before council with recommended changes to the city's planning program well in advance of the 1 year, and particularly recognizing the importance of this matter and having this resolved as quickly as possible for council. In the interim, notwithstanding the prohibitions on the development of new shelters, the interim control bylaw also introduced some exemptions, to existing shelter facilities and also to shelter facilities that would allow occupancies of up to 20 individuals in each shelter facility, to certainly ensure that while we go in through the winter months, that there are no individuals who are left out in the cold, so to speak. So with that, after developing and implementing an interim control bylaw comes the work of developing the planning study that will conclude the interim control bylaw period and propose changes to the municipality's planning framework to, again, properly address the planning for emergency shelters over the long term. One of the things that we certainly discovered in our review of the city's planning framework leading up to the implementation of the interim control bylaw was essentially a planning framework that was quite silent on planning for emergency shelters and planning for homeless populations in the community. Very few policies in the official plan address this matter directly. And as I think I've mentioned before to this council, we also have a situation in our zoning bylaw where there are no direct definitions, specific definitions of what constitutes emergency shelters, that emergency shelters are subsumed within a larger definition of institutional uses. We don't include some of the classic zoning tools as they relate to emergency shelters or similar facilities, and performance standards and regulatory standards in the zoning bylaw as well. So certainly from our perspective, as your planning consultants, we saw a definite need to develop a more robust planning framework to help council plan for these uses over the long term. And we are proposing a planning study that, as I mentioned, we believe that we can accomplish for the city in a period of 6 months. It's a 3-phase work plan that has 4 primary objectives related to it. The 4 primary objectives are to assess the current state of emergency shelters in Cornwall, including their spatial distribution and their capacity. The second being to evaluate the adequacy of existing official plan policies and zoning regulations with respect to emergency shelters. Part of that work was already completed in the lead up to the adoption of the interim control bylaw. The third objective of the study will be to undertake a best practice review of planning for households experiencing homelessness, and we'll certainly be relying on the expertise that council has in-house, particularly from the individuals that just spoke, in helping us understand what some of those best practices are. And the fourth objective of the study will be to recommend strategies to ensure the proper planning and integration of emergency shelters in the city, and which would include potential amendments to the city's official plan and the zoning bylaw. With respect to the scope of work, as I mentioned, this would be a three-phase program of work. The first phase of the program would be a background analysis, which will establish the analytical foundations for the study and its recommendations. The background analysis will include an environmental scan of current trends in homelessness, including current trends in homelessness and housing of homeless populations, best practices and jurisdictional review of planning for homeless populations and emergency shelters in Ontario, a policy and regulatory framework review of the city's planning and administrative framework, and an inventory and analysis of existing shelters in Cornwall, including their location, capacity, and service levels. The second phase of the planning program will involve the consultation and engagement. So this will include a posting of the background report on the city's engagement platform for reviewing and commenting by the general public, the hosting of an in-person public open house to present the findings of the background report and to receive feedback from community members on the issue. And we'll also be seeking to conduct stakeholder interviews with municipal staff, social services providers, existing shelter operators, households experiencing homelessness, and other organizations serving the city's homeless population, to again validate the research that we will have conducted to date, but to also understand some of the strategic directions that we need to take the study in from those who are dealing with and experiencing homelessness on a frontline basis. The third and final phase of the planning study will be the development of a recommendations report. And the recommendations report will be based on the analysis contained in the background report that we'll have prepared as part of part one, and also the consultation, what we heard from the community in part two. And the recommendations report will include three parts: a proposed wording to form the basis of potential amendments to the city's official plan and zoning bylaw. It will also include any other recommended changes to any other parts of the city's planning program and administrative framework. This may include the city's site plan control bylaw, for instance, or perhaps updates to the housing and homelessness plan for the city. And finally, it will also include any additional recommended initiatives or recommended programming involving the housing of households experiencing homelessness. Once again, while the interim control bylaw will be in effect for 1 year, we're very optimistic that we can complete this planning study for the city within approximately a 6-month period to ensure that we're able to repeal the interim control bylaw as quickly as possible, and to ensure that the city has, again, a robust planning framework moving forward for the long-term planning for both emergency shelters and the populations experiencing homelessness within the city. With that, I will certainly turn the microphone back over to you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm certainly happy to field any questions that members of council may have.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my first question relates to the term, you talked about existing shelters, so I guess I want you to define shelter as you understand it. What do you think we have already in Cornwall by way of an existing shelter?
So if I could be quite frank, I'm not entirely sure at this point what the city of Cornwall has in terms of existing shelter facilities. What we do know about existing shelters is that they can take a number of different forms. They can be certainly the more traditional church basement or dormitory style shelters that we have. They can also be shelters that can include the renting of hotel rooms, for instance, to house people, temporarily house people. So one of the first tasks that we really need to understand is what is the full spectrum and range of emergency shelters as they exist in the city? What is their capacity and who is running them and how well are they functioning? It's a question that I'm certainly very interested in delving into as we begin the planning study is, again, the full spectrum is what existing shelter facilities in all their forms do we see existing in the city?
So I guess just to follow up on that, since you mentioned church basements, among other things, I'm presuming you mean shelters, hotel rooms, for example, that might be provided by the municipality, and or in the case of churches, non-profit organizations. Do you foresee private for-profit organizations establishing shelters that we would have to regulate or condone in some way? Or I guess regulate would be the word.
It's a very big question to answer. I'm not personally aware or professionally aware at this point of private sector bodies that are offering shelter services. That certainly doesn't mean that they don't exist elsewhere in the province of Ontario, but that's certainly part of the planning study that we want to undertake to ensure, again, that the city has a robust planning framework to address the operations and the locating of shelters, whether they be offered by the nonprofit or the profit sector.
Okay. And then, Mr. Mayor, if I can just ask one more, I said that was the last one, but it isn't. You mentioned 20 at some point, and I'm just trying to sort out exactly, does that mean that with the interim control bylaw that we have in place, as a center housing, say, 20 people, could be established or not? Or how does the 20 come in there?
The interim control bylaw prohibits the establishment of any new shelter within the city, with the exception of establishing a shelter for up to 20 individuals. So that was kind of a release valve that was introduced into the existing interim control bylaw. And that number was selected certainly with discussions with municipal staff and social services to make sure that it was a number that was based in the realities of the homeless population in Cornwall. But that it's essentially an exemption from that's provided for in the bylaw for homeless shelters to operate in the interim period while we're developing new policies and regulation.
Thank you very much for that.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Ngunjo.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. To me, it's quite unclear on how this item is addressed. Related to the presentation we got a few minutes ago and the plan that is presented here. In one hand, we hear that decisions are taken concerning, for example, Massey Place. And here we have a plan that are saying that decisions are going to be made. I don't know if the CEO can explain more what is the...
Do you mind re-asking your question, Councillor?
So I was saying, so one side we had a presentation with a lot of decisions made. For example, the Vincent Massey Place. And here we have a presentation with a plan saying that decisions are going to be made. So I would like to understand if, for example, this presentation is going to impact the one that was done before.
I'll let Melissa elaborate, but our housing team, as well as the planning consultant, we're working hand in hand. I don't believe any of our operational priorities are impacted by the review. Quite the opposite. We want to make sure that we plan for the future of needs for folks in need in our community. But I'll let Melissa elaborate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So to answer your question, Councillor, our winter housing solution is a maximum of 20 individuals, but our Massey Place is more permanent housing. It would not fall under this interim control bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions or comments? Okay. Looking for a motion, council. Councilor Good, are you moving the recommendation? Seconder, Councilor Ngunjo? Okay. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Ms. Blanchard, Mr. Hicks, thank you again for joining us. Good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening.
Moving on to consent reports. Our first one is a proclamation for National Diabetes Day with a recommendation that council proclaim Tuesday, November 14th, 2023 as National Diabetes Day in the city of Cornwall. Another proclamation with a recommendation that council proclaim Friday, November 17th, 2023 as Prematurity Day in the city of Cornwall. Another proclamation with a recommendation that council proclaims Sunday, November 26, 2023 as Economic Abuse Awareness Day in the city of Cornwall. CPEG from October 5th with the following recommendation for 612 Montreal Road and 338 2nd Street West. The council approve the 2 Cornwall Planning Programs Evaluation Group recommendations as presented on October 5th. That is it, Mr. Mayor.
Motion. Councilor McDonald, Councilor Dupel, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Unfinished business listing. That council received the unfinished business listing for November 14th.
Motion, Councilor Dupel, seconded, Councilor Sabra. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried, thank you.
Proclamation, National Housing Day, with a recommendation that council proclaim Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023 as National Housing Day in the city of Cornwall.
Motion, Councilor Good, seconder, Councilor Ngunjo, discussion. Councilor Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to pull this item. I felt like it was very relevant to the discussions that we were having today. You know, given that National Housing Day is on November 22nd, and Habitat for Humanity, for which I was on the board the last 5 years, and no longer is about to be celebrating their 25th anniversary. I also wanted to acknowledge that is the same day that we are doing our budget resident cafe. So unfortunately, I won't be able to be there as I will be attending the 25th anniversary, and I hope that we have plans to host another resident cafe, given I'm sure I'm not the only one with a conflict.
Thank you, Councilor Good. We are looking to have some town halls regarding public budget engagement. More details to follow. Further comments? Ms. Morgan, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Certainly our housing services team has been working to create some information with respect to National Housing Day. We have a media campaign that's going out for, I believe it's 8 days, just to provide the general public with a number of information sessions on various types of housing options, what we do in the city, what is homelessness, definitions, myths, those types of things. We also have a flag raising on the 22nd in the courtyard in front of 340 Pitt, and we will be providing a flag to the United Counties for them to fly on that day as well.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Our next report is proposed monopole cell tower at 780 Sydney Street with the following recommendation. That council pass the subject resolution of support for the proposed Share Tower Inc. 30-meter tall monopole tower at 780 Sydney Street, following which a municipal concurrence letter can be issued. The operative clause of the accompanying resolution is as follows. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cornwall fully supports and endorses the proposed Share Tower Inc. 30-meter tall monopole tower to be situated at 780 Sydney Street as herein described.
Motion, Counselor Gardner, Counselor Good, discussion? Counselor Good?
Thanks through you, Mr. Mayor. I brought this out just because I had remarked on, one of the comments from the neighboring business about just proximity to their site and falling ice and that kind of thing. I wanted to bring it forward because I feel like it's not something that we often see, a new cell phone tower. Do we know, will this provide a great benefit to the residents, our community, as far as connectivity is concerned?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, hard for me I don't have the technical expertise to say exactly the benefit, but it is, there is a map in that report that does provide for the cell phone coverage that this tower would serve. And as part of the process, they are obligated to review with other existing cell phone towers as to whether there's potential to lease space on those existing towers before constructing a new one. So it is being done to improve the cell phone coverage in our community. But to what extent, I don't have that expertise to be able to describe properly.
Fair enough, thank you. I guess maybe since I don't feel like there's probably a lot of precedent for this, it looks like the setback is 1.5 meters from the property line or something to that effect, it looks like. Given the concerns from the neighboring lots, is there any kind of recommendation that can be brought to sort of move it in maybe another 10 feet or so, just to provide a bit of a barrier or a bit of buffer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there were some changes to the design in response to some of the comments received by the surrounding neighborhood, and I think within the fenced-in compound, they've moved the tower itself into a different area of that of the fenced-in compound, and then the comments specific to the business next door. I think they had mentioned that the concerns were with falling ice and birds that might roost on the tower, and they addressed those by saying that the falling ice would fall within the fenced-in compound that surrounds the tower, and that they do regularly maintain the tower and remove birds' nests because it poses an operational problem for them as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw they remove them once a year, which is kind of interesting. Okay, well, I hope that I have a super strong signal next time I get a call once this thing's built. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Next is the request for complimentary parking with the following recommendations. That council receive this report and approve the request from the Cornwall and Area Chamber of Commerce for complimentary parking, fees and enforcement waived after 4 p.m. in a downtown BIA, and extend the request to include Le Village BIA for the month of December.
Motion?
And, I
sorry.
have one more recommendation, Mr. Mayor, for this report, and that is promotion would be a joint effort between the Chamber of Commerce, the respective BIA districts, and the city.
Thank you. My apologies. Motion? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Hollingsworth. Discussion? Councillor Gunjo, then Councillor Gardner.
Mr. Mayor, I asked that this matter be pulled in part so we can draw attention to it. Our downtown merchant needs support because a healthy downtown makes for a strong community. Parking is crucial to the success of downtown businesses, so I support this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hearken back to COVID-19 and all the business that they lost during that time, the businesses in downtown BIA and Le Village, and I support this wholeheartedly. It'd be a chance for them to catch up to what they lost in those 3 years.
Thank you. Further comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Next is tender 23 T50, supply of electrical services for various city departments. The recommendation is that this tender be awarded to Bergeron Electric Limited from Cornwall for a 2-year period from December 1st, 2023 to November 30th, 2025, with an option to renew for an additional 1-year term at the total bid price of $272,716.25.
Motion. Counselor Gardner, seconded. Counselor McIntosh. Discussion. Counselor Goodrow.
Mr. Mayor, I have said this before, and I must say it again tonight. We should not be seeing just rubber stamping millions of dollars of expenditure without considering each of those items on their own. So I think maybe we should take some time to speak about money from our residents that we are spending.
Thank you. Further discussion? I do have one question. Looking at the cost, I know it's for 2 years, the option to renew. Is there any consideration given to bringing an additional electrician in-house? Is that something we're currently looking at or would consider? I know we have one currently. Not sure who would answer that.
I can answer. We do have one headcount currently, and we have considered expanding our complement to include additional trades. An additional electrician is a possibility. However, using contracted services such as, in this case, Bergeron Electric, does have benefits in that there are projects that are too big for our staff. I think having an in-house electrician does help with the regular issues that we encounter, but there are one-offs as well as larger projects in which a contractor such as Bergeron that has a greater capacity to complete certain scale projects than an individual 1 or 2 employees could do. So it is something that we are looking at.
Thank you. Okay. All in favor? Carried, thank you.
RFP 23P18, Engineering Design Services for the Reconstruction and Widening of Marlow Avenue. The recommendation that this RFP be awarded to 1009747 Canada Incorporated, operating as EVB Engineer from Cornwall, at the total bid price of $1,273,943.92.
Motion. Counselor Sabri, second by Counselor Bennett. Discussion. Counselor Goodrow.
Mr. Mayor, once again, I would like to bring this item under the spot to show that we have to speak about, we're gonna spend more than 1 million, so it's an occasion for us to speak about that and to show that we're spending, and we are looking each of dollars that we're spending from our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Further commentary? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
RFP 23P20, Design Services for the Affordable Housing Project at 1520 Cumberland. The recommendation that this RFP be awarded to the Venton Group Limited, plus VG Architects from Ottawa at a total bid price of $224,672.25, including HST.
Motion. Counselor Bennett, Counselor McDonald. Discussion. Counselor Goodrow, then Counselor McDonald.
Same remark, Mr. Mayor, just 1 minute to speak about our money.
Thank you. Counselor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to commend our housing staff for moving this initiative so quickly.
Thank you. Further comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Okay, a little slow on the hand there, Councilor Alexingsworth.
RFP 23P23, Supply and Installation of Play Structure and Poured-in-Place Rubber Surfacing at St. Teresa Park, with a recommendation that this RFP be awarded to New World Park Solutions Incorporated from Brantford, Ontario, at the total bid price of $677,844.06.
Motion. Counselor Gardner, Counselor Sabri. Discussion. Councillor Gunjo?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to say that I totally support this, but I wanted to spend 1 minute to speak about money that we're gonna spend. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Good?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I am so stoked about this project, as you've heard me say many, many times, and very, very proud of the fundraising effort that was done by Rachel's Kids, and that the city is only spending the same amount that we would be spending on any kind of park restoration for this project. So it looks like we're doing the regular $75K, which is what we typically do, and that they have topped that up by $600,000. So I am so excited to see what this park is going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Yep, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Moving on to bylaws, Mr. Mayor. Bylaws 2023-099 to 107 inclusive, listed on the agenda, are being presented to council for adoption.
Motion. Councillor Bennett, Councillor Sabray, all in favor? Opposed? Motions are carried. Thank you.
And we are now at reports from standing advisory, special, and ad hoc committees of council.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to mention two wonderful opportunities at the moment for those Christmas shopping. Klein House Gallery has a wonderful show of small pieces of art which make great gifts for people who already have fully decorated homes. But at the same time, actually starting this weekend, Focus Art, in partnership with Cornwall Square, has a showing of 108 pieces done by 44 artists, and this will be for the next 2 weekends. So by all means, great place to start your Christmas shopping.
Thank you. Any further reports? Okay.
And we are looking for adoption of the confirming bylaw.
Motion, Councillor McDonald, seconder. Councillor Hollingsworth, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Tough crowd. Adjournment. Councillor Sabray and Councillor Dupel, all in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Merci. Good night. Bonsoir.